Hello, Rob here from the Flanagan Homestead. It's May 25th. I'm doing a checkup on how the planting of our Christmas trees went this year. I've got my camera tucked inside the truck because the wind is blowing and messing with the audio, but hopefully it comes through all right. So if you find anything that you any value here, please hit like, maybe consider subscribing, but I'll continue to cover my Christmas tree farm. So anyway, in the section of field that you see behind me, most of it was wiped out last year. We had tons of sales. We have way more customers than we have trees right now. And so we had to do a lot of replanting. We are a small Christmas tree farm, but in the last 2 years, we've planted 5,000 more Christmas trees. A few of those were grands last year. This year, they were all nobles and Noordmans. We did 1,000 nobles and 1,000 Noordmans this year. We did 3,000 trees last year. So this is kind of an update on how things went. In case you don't know, here in Western Washington, we had a drought in April. We had a very wet winter. It rained over 60 inches from October to February. We put our trees in the ground and it just stopped raining. And it was like, no, everybody's like, oh, the weather's so nice out here. We're swimming in April. We had a week of 85+ degree weather. No rain for almost a month, which April is normally really wet, and everybody's running around going, oh, this weather's so great. And as a Christmas tree farmer, and we don't typically irrigate out here in Western Washington, I'm just like, bring on the rain. And so there was probably a 6 or 7 week period where we had 1 or 2 days of rain and was barely any. And so I was really concerned, but fortunately I don't think most of my trees had really broke out of dormancy completely yet. So as I've looked, it hasn't damaged it as much as I thought it might. We're going to cover that, look at the trees. But my Doug firs, I have only a small section of Doug firs. You could basically throw them on the ground, kick dirt over them, and they'll grow. I mean, I exaggerate, but they'll grow so easy in anything. But nobles are very sensitive to transplanting that first year, and there's usually a pretty high percentage that die off, well, maybe as much as 20% just anyway. And so when we had this heat, I was like, oh man, it's going to be disastrous. We even had a burn ban put on in Western Washington State in April for a while there. I had a small forest fire up near my place for the second time in a couple years, and we even had the helicopters flying overhead, scooping water out of the river and putting out the fire. But I wasn't too nervous because even though it had been that hot, this time of year things don't really take off around here. But since then, last week and the last couple days, we had measurable rainfall, things puddling up, water getting into the ground, and so our ground that was completely dry for a while there in mid-May, it seems like, it now has moisture in it again. And so some of the trees are looking pretty good. We're going to go take a look at it. Some of them aren't doing that good. But so if you follow our channel, you know that we had a huge harvest the last couple years, and you could see that a big section of our field, at least this section, has really been picked through, and we're starting with young trees again. On this side, we have a few decent sized nobles, but we're really low on our inventory right now. So here we go on this section of Noordmans. They're slow starters as well. These are several-year-old trees to transplant. They're even slower in the nurseries. You get nursery stock of Noordmans, and they could be 2 years old and 4 inches tall. Some of these are probably 4-year-old trees, I believe, 3 or 4-year-old trees from seed to here. So not taking off too much, not thriving, but they have a chance. This is a 2nd-year-old row of nobles. We got some nobles, and 1,000 or so of them had a little bit of yellowing, and the nursery that we buy our trees from, and which I trust them and they're good people, noticed the yellowing, and they did all kinds of tests and said the nutrient level was good and do we want them, and we went ahead and bought them, and they survived last year, kind of yellow. They look like they're getting a little bit better color this year, but they are not thriving as much. Whatever was causing the yellowing has not been completely conquered, and they're just not thriving like a tree this age should. And there's been twice in our career that we've pushed our luck on getting a seed source or some nursery stock that, see, that was yellow, that wasn't quite exactly what we wanted, but because we really wanted to get trees in the ground, we bought them. Look at all the yellowing on these still. They're alive, but they're yellowing. And my advice to myself and you is, if you're not going to get a good seed source and a good seedling, don't put it in the ground. Just wait another year. Because if this thing, it's one thing for these to be struggling right now, but this is year 2 or 3 of struggling. And if I keep waiting for these while they're struggling for 3 or 4 or 5 years before I figure out these aren't going to make a good tree, I have wasted a lot of time. Okay, so wait till you get a good seed source. Wait till you get a tree that you know is going to be good. Now this section, that's some nice color. That's some nice color. That's some nice color. Looking good. Looking good. Would like some more growth, but good color for new growth. So hopefully it's picking up the nitrogen and whatever it was low on, and they're going to take off. Now here's a section of trees that I'm really pleased with. Out here in the hayfield where the trees are basically struggling, we sprayed spots to kill them last fall, and then we planted in here, and we put plugs in, and the plugs are smaller, but instead of just using the dibble, and which is the shape of a plug, and it has a foot peg to step on, you put it in there and you step on it, and you pull the plugs out like a popsicle, and you just stick it in the hole and then put the dirt around there. Normally you do it that way, but we decided that we were going to get an auger and turn up this ground, because there was a little, even though we killed the ground, there was a little bit of root ball and whatnot, and we wanted to till it up. So we took a 6-inch auger, dug a hole, put the trees in there, and I'll tell you what, it took longer to plant them, but I'm going to take you up and down these rows right now of plugs that we actually put the auger in the ground and turned it up loose and tried to plant the trees so it's actually slightly lower than the soil level, so if there's any water drainage, it'll go in there and the roots will be down there lower. But I'm really happy with the color of these plugs that we actually did not use a dibble, but we used an auger, a 6-inch auger, drilled a hole, put these in. So here there's the plugs, but like I said, nobles usually struggle a lot in the first year, and just look at these tree after tree with beautiful color. And we're talking about in a year where there was a drought in April here in Western Washington. I mentioned earlier, burn bans on, forest fires in April, 80+ degrees, people going swimming, and well, there's one tree that has a little bit of brown, but other than that, these plugs with an auger to loosen up the soil, I have never, I don't think, ever had this percentage of trees looking this good. I mean, it's just tree after tree that looks magnificent. Praise God. This one has a little bit of brown on it. Actually, that one's not even a plug. That's in 2-0 row. So here we go back to the plugs. A little bit of brown, but just beautiful looking trees. If they can hold on like this, I think I'm buying plugs and using the auger. I know it's more work and they're a little bit smaller, but I'll do an update later in the summer to see how these are doing. But honestly, this is magnificent. Now there's a light colored one that's struggling. But these plugs planted with an auger I am honestly thrilled with what I see. And then we get back to the 2 O's that were planted with a spade. Just not worth it. So we only spent $600 in labor to plant all these trees this year, which is a cost saving because we had that professional crew come in, and I don't think they rushed it. I followed them and they did a good job planting, but these 2 O's planted with a spade just aren't even close to what the plugs with the auger. Now the plugs with an auger will take probably, instead of $600 labor, we'll probably put $1,500 to labor to get those planted. But do I want thousands of trees to survive or half as many to survive and pay the cost? In the long run, if things continue the way they look now, I'm paying an extra $1,000 a year in labor to get trees that have this color. Just awesome. Here's another interesting side note. This section of trees, there's about 100, 150 trees left out here. These trees were set up for failure. We planted the other stuff. We did not have, this is out in the hayfield. We did not kill the grass. We did not do anything to prepare it. We ran out of spaces to plant, and so we just had 150 bags left in the bag. They were left there for a few days, which is not good for the trees. I just grabbed my son, sent him out here and said, use the auger, dig a hole out in the pasture and put trees in the ground, and hopefully some of them survive. And the ones that were in prepared ground with a spade look a lot worse than these. So I have to pull back the grass so you can see it, because we didn't kill any ground here. But the auger tilled up the ground enough that when we put this tree in, and I told him to plant them a little bit low so they can keep getting moisture. But here's a row of these straight consecutive that the color is significantly better than the prepared ground. This one's a little bit brown, but and these trees were absolutely set up for failure, just augering a hole out in the hayfield with no other preparation. But they're competing with the grass for moisture. Maybe they're getting a little shade when it got hot. But they're looking actually significantly better than the prepared ground and the spade planting. So this auger may be getting a lot of use next spring trying to plant out here. We had 400, maybe 500, I'll have to go look at the stats again, of plugs because we couldn't get it was so wet, because I mentioned in the winter it was so wet when they wanted to do their digging, they couldn't dig it up. And when we wanted to do our planting, they said, we're not ready yet, but we do have some plugs. So we took, of our nobles, 500 were 2 O's, seedlings, and 500 or 400 of them were plugs. And if you, we haven't had great success with the plugs in the past, so this year where we were putting the plugs, we actually used an auger to basically till up the soil and break up anything that was there. We stuck it back in there and then threw the dirt back in, so it was actually a really easy planting to put it back in there. But using the auger took a little bit more time. But as we go through and we look at the field, the trees that we used that came from plugs, and we used the auger, and I told the planters, let's get this a little bit lower than normal levels so that it's down there and getting good moisture in the soil. By far the best section of the trees as far as how they look. Now when we get to the end of the summer, when they've got past their growing stage and they hit dormancy and they go dormant in August or late August and early September, and they start getting woody, and then they make it through that dormant stage to the rainy stage. If they're still looking green and everything, I think this is the route that we're probably going to go in the future. If the percentages look this good for those in the future, we just have to do it. Will it, can I plant 2,000 trees with only $600 labor if I'm using the auger? No. But if I'm going to get this percentage of trees healthy and growing It's worth it because every time a tree dies, you waste a year in that spot. And you don't want to be struggling, waiting. You want to get the trees in the ground. You want to get them growing. Plus, I'm 53 years old and I want to retire from my teaching job at 60, and it takes about 7 years to grow a noble. So I need these suckers growing now.